Hello students and friends. Today in this homeopathic Materia Medica, I will discuss about sulfur. Before start, please subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon for more update. We need support from you to make this channel more beautiful. Sulfur idiosyncrasy corresponds materially to the homonymous element of the periodic table of elements. It's a widely spread element in the mineral world, just as many other materials that are the material basis of fundamental polycrest idiosyncrasies like silica, silicon, natrum, muriaticum, sodium chlorate, cooking salt, phosphor, calcarea, carbonica, calcium carbonate, etc. 1. Cyric and psychotic sulfur. We have already described lycopodium, a relative idiosyncrasy of sulfur, both belonging to the intellectual idiosyncratic family. So, it's expected to find that they have many similarities and of course some differences too. The two most important similarities are intellectuality and Cyric vanity. There are two versions of sulfur, the Cyric version that resembles lycopodium and the psychotic version that resembles medorinum. 2. The pessimist, superficial, unconventional philosopher. Sulfur is a very intellectual idiosyncrasy. He thinks a lot. His thinking is much more intense and wide than his emotions. He thinks a lot of himself. He is full of himself. Not in a syphilitic way like Platina, but in a Cyric way. Cyric sulfur is intensely introverted, as much introverted as natrum muriaticum. The above characteristics explain the fact that sulfur lives in the world of his own, especially the Cyric version. Both sulfur and lycopodium tend to philosophize a lot, but sulfur is more pessimistic and superficial, while lycopodium is deeper and better organized in thought. Cyric sulfur has that great ability to produce many thoughts, especially original and new ideas. But his thinking isn't as organized and systematic as lycopodium's. His thinking is shallower. Many absent-minded/scatterbrained geniuses have been sulfur individuals. Thales of Miletus, one of the 7 wise men of ancient Greece, a great mathematician and astronomer of his times, must have been a sulfur subject. One night he was walking with his head turned up to the stars, absorbed in his scientific and philosophical thoughts. An old female assistant accompanied him. Suddenly he fell into a hole, was hurt and started moaning. His nagging old assistant, that must have been a lachesis woman, told him, "You don't know what's right in front of you. How on earth do you want to know what's up in the sky?" Diogenes, the cynical ancient Greek philosopher, was famous for his unconventional philosophy and nonconformist way of living. He was dirty, slovenly and typically scruffy. He used a large clay storage jar as his house. He used to be very ironic towards his nouveau riche Athenian fellow citizens that lived a conventional and full of comforts life. Einstein, that great mathematic genius of modern times, has been described as slovenly, uncombed, unorganized and very absent-minded. At high school he was considered a mediocre. Nevertheless, he managed to conceive the relativity theory, one of the most difficult to comprehend theories of physics and mathematics. All the above and a great many other geniuses have the typical traits of sulfur: slovenly, sometimes even dirty, very intellectual, having a natural tendency and ability for scientific and especially mathematical thinking, unconventional behavior, critical tendency towards others and society, absent-mindedness, tendency to philosophize, living in the world of their own. 3. Comparison between Cyric sulfur and lycopodium. Sulfur thinks a lot of him, is full of him, even more than lycopodium, although he doesn't have the latter's accomplishments. What do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. Lycopodium student is very diligent, attentive, hard-working, and industrious. He is prone to systematic reading, keeps detailed notes, listens carefully to his teachers, organizes his notes and thoughts, compares and even creates charts, tables, lists, diagrams and graphics. He is the typical good student, the typical diligent, shy, and obedient student. On the contrary, sulfur student is slovenly, unorganized and anything but systematic. He is lazy and easily bored for common things, but he can be very passionate about anything that interests him, like for example, mathematics and computers. He may neglect himself as to clothes, food, company and even recreation only to be absorbed in TV, computer games, surfing the internet, solving a mathematical equation or inventing strange and most of the times useless things. Even then he won't be systematic and organized. His room will be chaotic, his lab chaotic, his notes chaotic. If he is an excellent student, it will be a result of his genius and not due to hard working. Moreover, he is never the good kid. Not that he will be a bad boy, but he is a natural when it comes to unconventional behavior, sarcastic humor, being critical, playing practical jokes to others but not mean ones, philosophizing and against any authority and strict system of ideals. He may even declare himself as the rebellion guy or the theoretical mind of revolution. A psychotic sulfur is usually very social although introverted, while a Cyric sulfur will be very reserved, living in the world of his own, in his own philosophical world. Sulfur is the typical fan of Diogenes' cynical philosophy, while Lycopodium is the typical fan of Aristotle's logic. The latter is very systematical and organized, and that's the reason why Aristotle has written so many bulgy books about all things. His logic has the disadvantages of any strict not dialectical thinking. It raises unsurpassable boundaries among ideas and cannot be used to understand the unity of opposites. Sulfur, on the contrary, is the fan of unconventional logic and thinking. He tends to create new original ideas and theories that overcome establishment, although he doesn't care if these theories have any strong logical or scientific foundation. His thinking tends to be global, universal, and very philosophical. He is very fond of subjects like the creation of universe, the laws of universe, God, the mystery of life, the meaning of life, social laws, the existence of human being and its origin, existential inquiries, life and death, psychic phenomena, etc. Anything that involves mystery is a real attraction to him. Metaphysical matters, paranormal matters, the mysteries of the universe, alien civilizations, the mysterious ancient civilizations, mysteries of the human body, black holes of the universe, relativity theory, the theory of chaos, black magic, meditation, alternative medicine, the mysteries of pyramids of Egypt, parapsychology, etc. Lycopodium is usually interested in classical psychology or Freudian analysis, while sulfur is usually fond of parapsychology. Lycopodium is usually interested in Aristotle's philosophy, while sulfur on Diogenes or Schopenhauer philosophy. Lycopodium will usually be fan of democratic socialism, while sulfur usually loves anarchist Bakunin or liberal Trotsky. 4. The effect of idiosyncrasy on secondary behavior. I've mentioned all the above as examples of the effect of idiosyncrasy on secondary behavior. Yet, since secondary behavior is just a cog in the machine, things do become a lot diverse and cannot be dealt in an absolute way. For example, we should never match in an absolute manner a certain idiosyncrasy with a certain field of knowledge, profession or Ideology. A sulfur individual could be a fanatic believer or an atheist. Fan of law and order or anarchist, fan of science or fan of parapsychology, etc. Never forget that all these are but secondary behaviors, mental patterns. Acquired behaviors, labels. Secondary behaviors are defined not only from the person's idiosyncrasy but also from the family he was raised, the education he received, local culture and past experiences. That's the reason why two persons having the same idiosyncrasy tend to have the same primary behavior but may end up in different or even opposite secondary behaviors. What really counts for us, homeopaths, is what lies beneath the patient's secondary behavior. Someone could wonder, how can a sulfur individual be fan of science and another one be fan of parapsychology? How can this be possible? You see, what's common in both cases is the superficial philosophical tendency. Although science isn't a superficial field, nevertheless, sulfur will find the way to practice it in a superficial way by dealing not with strict laws but with theories, for example relativity theory or theory of chaos, matter and antimatter etc. He will not be the hard-working and systematical student and lover of science, he will rather be the one who claims to know scientific things and likes to refer to impressive scientific terms, strange natural phenomena and peculiar scientific theories. He will deal with the same shallow way with parapsychology. He won't be the systematical, organized, diligent student. He won't be the believer that will do regular meditation. He will learn many impressive terms, develop his own strange theories and will be absolute about his own ideas. So, as sulfur is concerned, the common thing in these different fields, science and parapsychology, is the superficial philosophical tendency. 5. Superficial erudition. Both sulfur and lycopodium tend to read many books. But if you come across lycopodium's library, you will clearly face a very neat and organized library, clean and tidy, well-preserved books, notes and underlining that show that he has really not only read but also studied them thoroughly. Sulfur's library will be full of dust, chaotic, torn pages, and half-read books. There will be all kinds of books, weird and scientific, plain and sophisticated, comics and philosophical ones, cooking and psychology, cheap novels and Tolstoy, science fiction and science reviews, etc. Cyric, sulfur and lycopodium are fond of documentaries about nature and animals, strange scientific discoveries, politics, history, and social matters. They may also like those sophisticated existential pseudo-intellectual movies with sophisticated titles, slow filming, full of symbolisms and weird end. On the contrary, psychotic sulfur will resemble Materia, fan of football, basketball, silly superficial comedies, thrillers, adventure movies, action movies, and light movies in general. 1.6 Superficial, pessimistic philosophical tendency. As mentioned, sulfur thinks a lot of himself, he is full of himself. He thinks that his IQ, his cleverness, is above the average, that his philosophical thinking is original, that he is an expert in some or many fields, that he knows even if he hasn't read about something systematically, yet he feels that he has understood it, that he has grabbed its main idea, its core, its essence. Quite often, Cyric sulfur when alone, when driving or when doing some physical work is absent-minded, he is absorbed in his philosophical thoughts. Where are we heading as human society? Why do we live? Who are we? Why is society the way it is? What's the meaning of life? Quite often he goes further than that, giving his own original solutions to social problems and human burdens. He builds in his mind the ideal society according to his own philosophy. Psychotic Sulfur may wonder about the same things but in a more shallow way. In addition, he usually expresses his thoughts to others around him. What's characteristic is the way he expresses himself. He tends to be emphatic and often absolute because he knows. He will say, "Oh, come on. Give me a break. It's a fucking damn life. What's the point? We live like beasts, we are born, we're off ourselves working from dusk to dawn. We all hurt one another and in the end we all die and become food for worms. What's the point in living?" This is, of course, the way a low-class sulfur will express himself. Let me point out the way a sophisticated Cyric sulfur will express his philosophy. All is vanity. All are futile. Vanity is the core of existence. Death and loss of existence are inevitable. From this pointless existence arise human suffering and pain. The above two ways of expression differ a lot regarding language usage, terms and sophistication. In addition, the first is clearly psychotic expression, while the second is definitely Cyric expression. Nevertheless, both of them are characterized by the same superficial and pessimistic philosophical disposition, and that's what makes both correspond to sulfur idiosyncrasy. 7. Cyric introversion and isolation. Let's see some more aspects of Cyric sulfur. He is very introverted, even as much as natrum muriaticum, but in a different way. He isn't introverted out of extreme tendency for dignity or because he is easily offended like natrum muriaticum. If you ask him why he is introverted, he simply doesn't know, and he will sincerely answer to you that he doesn't know. He will probably say, "I don't know. I haven't given it much thought. I've always been like that." His introversion isn't a conscious choice, isn't deliberate, isn't the result of a logical conscious procedure. It has to do with his absent-mindedness, with him being absorbed to philosophical and existential thoughts. He simply lives in the world of his own, a philosophical world. Since he considers himself very clever and since he is mostly a pessimist, why discuss his personal problems with others? What's the point? If he can't solve it himself, then nobody else can do that, so what's the point of expressing it? Moreover, he is strongly convinced that problems and unhappiness are innate things, they come along with life itself. This is the kind of introversion that characterizes sulfur. He doesn't hide his personal matters, his deep felt matters from other people. Yet, he doesn't discuss it because he thinks that there's no point in discussing it. Nothing will come out from such an action, either because they are unsolvable by nature or because others just can't help him solve them. Yet, there is another way of dealing with his problems, not to deal with them by dealing with other things. Thus, according to his cultural level, he may employ one of the following attitudes: sit alone and think about irrelevant things all the time, pottering about at odd jobs or in the garden, playing computer games, surfing, or watching TV for hours and hours, sleeping all the time, playing chess or backgammon all day long, employing himself on philosophical discussions, political discussions, or discussions about art or religion all day long. 8. Laziness and boredom. Cyric sulfur often prefers solitude or a small company made up of only few close friends. Even then, that doesn't mean that he will easily talk about his deep felt matters. His wife may ask him, "What's the matter with you?" He will probably say, "Nothing. There's nothing wrong with me. I am just a little tired." Natrum muriaticum avoids answering to such questions so as not to speak about her personal matters, while Sulphur does not answer because he is not in the mood to talk about it. Besides, boredom is indeed a very strong trait of Sulphur. Sulphur students are so easily bored when they have to read most of their lessons. Sulphur is so bored when he has to take a bath, change clothes, or put things in order. He may even be so bored so as to avoid going out with close friends. He may just sit and watch TV for hours and hours. But whenever he occupies himself with things that he is fond of, then nobody can drag him away from it. He is so absorbed and passionate. When solving mathematical equations, playing computer games, surfing the internet, or dealing with peculiar inventions. He doesn't sleep, he doesn't drink, he doesn't eat, and he even avoids going to the toilet. The Sulphur low-class manual worker comes home from work tired. He doesn't even change his dirty clothes. He takes a beer in one hand, the remote control in the other, and is absorbed watching TV all the time. It's not that he is absorbed in that specific movie, he may be doing zapping all the time, absorbed in his thoughts or being in a thoughtless state. A sophisticated Sulphur individual spends many hours reading, writing, or thinking. He forgets to eat, talk to his wife, or communicate with his children. He is all the time in the world of his own. 9. Psychotic Sulfur. What about Psychotic Sulfur? He doesn't talk about his personal problems. 2. But not because he wants to hide things like Natrum muriaticum. He resembles Cyric Sulfur up to a point. You see, he sees no point in talking about something that can't be solved, or talking to others about something that is, indeed, his own problem. Furthermore, he also has the attitude of Mediorinum regarding this field. Mediorinum thinks that he hasn't got any problems, not that he doesn't have, but because he doesn't consider most problems as real problems. He is mostly interested in enjoying life and is indifferent in most family matters, social matters, or job matters. He will say to his nagging wife, "Back off, woman. Don't bust my balls. Bring some food on the table and a cold beer and let me watch the game in peace. Now go, go," or he may say to his friends whenever they are engaged in political or social discussions, "Why don't you stop dealing with crab/sheet and silly/boring staff? Let's go out to eat, drink, and get laid." That's what life is about. Not that he has any problem to talk about his personal matters. Nevertheless, he won't deal with it deeply and for long. The only thing that may disturb him is if he doesn't have enough money to be able to enjoy his life. Psychotic Sulfur is not a loner like Cyric Sulfur. Nor is he so absent-minded and living in the world of his own. In fact, he is very social. He may be the life and the soul of the party. He is so plethoric. He will be the one telling jokes all the time, even dirty ones or vulgar ones. He is the one that plays practical jokes to others. He may talk a lot or just wait for the right moment to pop up a joke or a philosophical idea. He tends to talk about all things, and in addition, he thinks he is an expert about everything, although his knowledge is usually superficial. He is such a jabberer, such a babbler, a real boaster. Baron Munchausen must have been a typical Psychotic Sulfur individual. Many typical boasting fishermen or hunters are but Psychotic Sulfur subjects. Psychotic Sulfur has firm opinions about all things. He judges everybody about everything. That doesn't mean that he wants to be engaged in a productive and democratic discussion. He is so absolute and definite in whatever he says. You just can't argue with him because he knows. He will probably say, "Oh please, give me a break, will you?" All politicians are thieves and crooks. The only thing they care about is money and power. He is so fond of practical jokes. Not that he does it so as to depreciate others, his intentions aren't bad. He wants the company to have fun and he will be the one to lead the party. Nevertheless, his jokes aren't sophisticated at all. In fact, his manners and jokes may be rude and crude. His humor may be vulgar, cynical, sarcastic, indiscreet, or even silly. On the contrary, a Psychotic Sulfur has a very good sense of humor. Psychotic Sulfur wants to be the life and the soul of the party, either in the tavern, at the coffee shop or cafeteria. He likes eating and drinking, backgammon and poker, watching football games at TV with his pals, playing practical jokes to others, talking about politics, fishing, hunting, and boasting about broads. 10. Hot, greasy, dirty, and slovenly. A great many physical characteristics of Psychotic Sulfur are intensely psychotic, intensely yang. He is one of the hottest idiosyncrasies. He is so hot, so damn hot, as if boiling all the time. He is hot even in winter. You may see him walking around in freezing weather wearing only a blouse or shirt or thin jacket, yet, most of the times, unbuttoned. During winter he uses only one blanket, which is as a rule, a thin one. Even if his bedroom is cold, he may get his feet out of the blanket because he feels them hot and burning. Or he may change place for his feet all the time in order to find a cooler spot. His head is so hot, his neck is so hot. He is hot all over from head to toes. No way is he going to put the sheet all over his head even if it's freezing cold around him. Any part of his body coming in touch with the mattress and pillow becomes hot and sweating. Often, he wakes up at night changing side or pillow because he is overheated and sweating. Pulsatilla and argentum nitricum are also hot, but not as hot as sulfur. They feel very uncomfortable in a hot room, especially when windows are closed. They feel choking. They feel better in open air, especially if it's fresh and cool. Lachesis is very hot during menopause due to flashes of heat. She may have been a cold organism, but during menopause she becomes hot in general and suffering from intense and frequent flashes of heat. Winter is the best time for Psychotic Sulfur, while summer is hell. Not only because he is hot, but also because he is sweating grade 3, he is soaked from sweat. He may even be dribbling from sweat, especially from the face. His head is full of sweat, his neck, his armpits, his genitals, his belly and back, his chest, his hands and feet are full of sweat. At times, in the summer when he is very hot and sweating, especially after physical exertion, you may see vapors of sweat coming out of his blouse towards his neck. He may even sweat during winter after slight exertion. His sweat, his urine, his stool, and all of his secretions are offensive and acrid, so they may irritate any part of the body they come in contact for long. His skin chafes easily, especially at the armpits, inguinal area and around the anus. This acrid sweat may even easily destroy his socks, shoes or blouses at the area of the armpits. You can consider the following fact as a reminder: the element sulfur is acrid and irritating to the skin and mucus. Many vineyard workers, when spraying vineyards with sulfur dust, have intense skin and mucus irritations from the sulfuric acid produced from mixing sulfur with water. As said before, all his secretions are offensive, extremely offensive. His sweat may smell bad even after hours or even minutes after he had a bath. His stool and urine smell bad, his gases smell very bad. There are two strange things when it comes to offensiveness of his secretions. First, he may not be annoyed from his offensive secretions or even may not realize that they are offensive. Second, he may be very annoyed even from slightly offensive secretions of others around him. On top of all the above, his skin and hair are very greasy, very oily. He takes a bath today and by tomorrow his hair is already greasy. That's one possible reason why many sulfur subjects develop hair falling and become bald even from early age. If you have a sulfur young man with greasy hair, he has two choices most of the times. Being very lazy, he doesn't bathe frequently, so his hair is oily for too long. All the pollutants from the atmosphere and dust are diluted into his greasy hair. Moreover, his acrid sweat stays on his skin and hair for too long. All the above affect chemically the roots of his hair. In addition, breathing of the skin of his hair is obstructed. Too many reasons in favor of hair falling. A second choice is frequent bathing with shampoo for greasy hair. Although sulfur is usually lazy, a young sulfur man interested in his appearance so as to make good impression to the opposite sex isn't a rare case. You see, motive makes the world go round. So, a sulfur young man, being aware of his tendency for greasy hair, bathes very frequently, using strong shampoos that cause dryness to the skin of his head. The skin reacts to dryness and increases secretion of sebum. This prolonged hypersecretion weakens sebaceous glands that nourish the roots of hair. And again, the result of this vicious circle is hair falling and baldness. Now, let's put all the discussed characteristics together to complete his external appearance. He is very hot, his face, lips and ears often are red and burning, he often wears light clothing, he is covered all over with sweat, his hair are greasy, his skin is oily and very often he is dirty and slovenly. He hates washing himself most of the times. His is so bored when it comes to his appearance and styling, so he puts on whatever is casual and ready to be worn, or even worse, his taste is kitsch. Put all these together and you have the typical look of a sulfur individual. Ain't it pretty? You must, of course, take in consideration that this is the typical picture of a typical low-class dirty sulfur individual. I mean, this is the case where primary behavior and secondary behavior are in match. Nowadays, culture, education, the media, and fashion tend to affect everybody, even lazy sulfur subjects. So it's not rare to find sulfur individuals that tend to take a good care of their external appearance. Profession also may play a significant role to the latter, especially if he happens to be a police or army officer. But, even then, beneath that perfect and neat look, you will be able to discover that characteristic sulfur stroke of slovenliness. His tie may not be straight or may be kirsch as color is concerned, his shirt's end may bulge over his pants, and on top of that he wears two different kinds of socks. Tidiness and sulfur are two opposite things. He is so unorganized, unkempt and slovenly. His room looks as if bombed and his mother is in constant despair. Pell-mell, higgledy-piggledy, a real mess. There is no pattern of any classification as his things are concerned. Nevertheless, in the midst of this chaotic state, most of the times, it's easy for him to find where his things are. So, whenever his mother puts his things in an order, he just can't find anything. A sulfur young man is most likely to be very slovenly, while adults at work are forced to become a little bit tidier. Most movements of a psychotic sulfur subject are psychotic and clumsy. While eating, he will easily get dirty or scatter crumbs all around his seat. While walking, he stumbles at all furniture or hurts himself on every corner of any furniture. Most of the persons that keep having little accidents all the time are sulfur subjects. Accordingly, The behavior of a psychotic sulfur subject will be as clumsy and rough as his movements. Again, we must take in consideration the influence of culture and society that smoothens the edges of such a rough behavior. He is also psychotic when it comes to his choice of tastes and appetite. Quite often, he is hungry and eating all the time. He wants quantity but not quality. He likes strong tastes and variety of tastes. He likes greasy food, fat, butter and oil. When it comes to meat, he prefers those parts that are rich to fat. He chooses those parts of meat that are full of fat, skin, bones and cartilages. That's the reason why he chooses pork instead of beef and chicken leg instead of chicken breast. He likes fat grade 3, that is, he even enjoys boiled fatty food and not only roasted, he even likes boiled skin instead of grilled. He thinks that any part of meat that hasn't enough juicy fat on it isn't tasty. Being psychotic, he also likes other strong tastes like pepper, salt, spicy food, sauces, seasonings, sweet, etc., like Materia does. Skin and peptic system are the two main fields that cause a lot of suffering to him. He often has skin problems like eczema, psoriasis, itching, acne, boils, and several kinds of rushes. He is usually bloated and full of gases and has enough retching and gargling. Anything he eats is turned into gases. You may find sulfur being dyspeptic, or he may tell you, I can digest anything. He is so greedy. Food is one of his top enjoyments. He lives so as to eat. He definitely doesn't eat so as to live. 11. The idiosyncratic diagram of sulfur. Raw material. The element sulfur of the periodic table of elements. Miasmas. Cyric sulfur is very Cyric as to ideas and expression. His physical characteristics and symptoms are also Cyric. Psychotic sulfur tends to be introvert and Cyric as to ideas, but his expression and his physical characteristics and symptoms are intensely psychotic. Basic passions. Cyric vanity, he thinks a lot of himself and considers himself as versed in many fields, although he usually has superficial knowledge of things. He strongly believes that he has understood the essence of all things and how all things in universe function. His philosophical ideas are usually superficial, pessimistic, and unconventional. Essence. The dirty, rugged, slovenly, Cyric/psychotic, introvert, bubbler, pessimistic, and superficial philosopher. Thinking. A psychic evolution. Being a very intellectual person, he is greatly related to intellectual psyche. His individual will is greatly influenced by his external will, especially the one that has to do with ideological systems. His intense philosophical tendency and his great curiosity tend to lead him towards universal laws and truth, but still his knowledge tends to be superficial and egoistic. His Cyric vanity and his attachment to ideological systems keep him away from true knowledge and true psychic evolution. B. Influences. Cyric vanity, introversion, and pessimism. He is very much influenced by intellectual thinking stimuli like abstract and philosophical ideas. Stressful conditions. Whenever he is forced to deal with things that make him feel bored, when they force him to get over his boredom and laziness, heat, and hunger, too much tidiness and programming, a strict schedule, when others distract him from his obsessions like watching TV, surfing the internet, playing computer games, dealing with inventions, etc. See general characteristics of his mental functions. Cyric sulfur is characterized by slow thinking, which is fixed to certain philosophical matters. He is usually a dreamer, all the time thinking how the world should be, and ends up in living in the world of his own Psychotic Sulfur is characterized by superficial thinking, and although shallow, he tends to be stubborn and absolute as to his ideas. Mental patterns. His mind is fixed on unconventional, strange, and pessimistic fields of knowledge, usually of a great variety and at times of opposite kind. For example, science, metaphysics, fan of the state, anarchy, etc. His usual themes are relativity theory, black holes of the universe, the meaning of life, the existence of God, why should there be boundaries among nations, how does the injection system of a car functions, etc. With whatever he deals, he seems to be fanatic and stubborn, but not because he is a fanatic believer, but because of his Cyric vanity. He is proud of himself that he knows so many things, and often he shows off to others, boasting about his genius mind. Frequency. A very frequent idiosyncrasy, especially among men, although not rare among women, extremely frequent among low class and fringe individuals, dreamers, philosophers, unconventional artists. Emotions. The general mood of Psychotic Sulfur is often melancholic and pessimistic. He often feels tired and bored. Psychotic Sulfur is characterized by superficial joy, in the sense that he is always joking, teasing others, and tends to be the heart and soul of the party all the time, wanting to have fun. Being very intellectual and shallow, he isn't characterized by intense intellectual emotional charge. Nevertheless, he tends to be more emotional than lycopodium because he is less rational and less calculating/selfish. Most of his emotions are intellectual emotions, while Psychotic Sulfur tends to have also a lot of physical sensations, in the sense of physical urges and desires. Intellectual emotions of Psychotic Sulfur are controlled, sincere, and idealized, while those of Psychotic Sulfur are shallow and changing all the time. Psychotic Sulfur often feels melancholy, pessimism, and not easily expressed vanity. Psychotic Sulfur often feels superficial, fleeting joy, superficial anger, and vanity that is expressed in the form of boasting. Behavior. Primary behavior of Psychotic Sulfur is controlled, sincere, with attachment to mental patterns and tendency to become a Don Quixote. He is very introvert and often slightly shy. But what greatly characterizes him is that he is a dreamer living in the world of his own, i.e. a strange philosophical world. On the other hand, primary behavior of Psychotic Sulfur is characterized by vulgar materialism, tendency for physical enjoyments, and fun of a lower level. He tends to be boasting, vulgar, and always teasing others. Both Ceric and Psychotic Sulfur tend to be unconventional and nonconformists, rejecting established behavior and opposing to it. So they both react to good manners, decent clothing, and refined manners. They tend to adopt unconventional and even rough manners, even feeling proud about it. They also tend to be sarcastic and critical towards established social institutions, established ideologies, and conventional behavior. Usual adopted behaviors. Religious or atheist after much philosophical thinking, fan of esotericism, pessimistic philosopher, the theoretical mind of an unconventional ideology, theoretical anarchist, fringe person. Avant-garde unconventional artist, funny guy, practical joker. Unconventional, nonconformist rebellion, the crazy but not villain. Scientist introducing strange ideas and peculiar and not always practical inventions, absent-minded philosopher, absent-minded scientist. Politically aware citizen, the Don Quixote, alternative doctor, scientist. Teacher or artist, theoretical fringe ecologist, lazy/easily bored. Student, slovenly guy, fan of superficial fun, fan of football. Boasting all the time of his knowledge on the theme, obsessive fan of computer games/TV/internet, rag picker, the philosopher alcoholic. Loner philosopher, boasting hunter/fisherman, bubbler, etc. Body. External appearance. Hot, with red face/ears, sweating all over, offensive, greasy hair, oily. Skin, slovenly, unkempt, clumsy, unconventional outfits, shy and reserved behavior, Cyric sulfur, rough and vulgar behavior, psychotic sulfur. Frequent physical predispositions. Acne, asthma, morning diarrhea, eczema, psoriasis, gastritis, colitis. Conjunctivitis, hemorrhoids, chronic headaches, allergies, obesity, boils. Frequent psychological predispositions. Melancholy, alcoholism, hashish abuser. Relative idiosyncrasies. Cyric sulfur, lycopodium, natrum muriaticum, gelsemium. Graphites, serinum. Psychotic sulfur, medorinum, phosphor. Lecture on sulfur. Sulfur is one of the most basic and frequent homeopathic idiosyncrasies. Especially frequent in men than in women. Sulfur idiosyncrasy corresponds to the homonymous homeopathic medicine prepared from the element sulfur of the periodic table of elements. We will begin our analysis from his physical traits that are very characteristic and then continue with the analysis of his mental sphere, which is the prevailing hierarchically. 12. Hot and sweating. Sulfur is one of the hottest idiosyncrasies. He is hot grade 3, he is literary boiling. Have you ever seen those red hot sweating individuals? With few clothes even in winter? There's a great chance they are sulfur subjects. Sulfur is sweating especially at the area of face, neck, and armpits. He is literary dripping with sweat. Wherever his body touches the mattress, the sheets or the pillow, they become soaked. No wonder he wakes up at night to change place on the mattress or turn his pillow upside down. Whenever doing physical work he can take off his blouse, squeeze it and let the sweat run down. He also sweats a lot at the area of feet, genitals, and anus. At times in the summer after physical exertion, vapor comes out of the upper part of his blouse. He is boiling and steaming. During winter he will go out wearing only a blouse or a light jacket and his mother or wife will run after him shouting, "Oh God! You'll catch a terrible cold. You'll get pneumonia, for God's sake." Even in winter. Even if the heater is off and the bedroom is cold, still he needs only light coverings. He may even want to have his feet out of the blankets because they are hot and sweating. Sometimes he doesn't get it out, but still he changes place all the time in order to find cool areas inside the sheets. Needless to say that he hates putting his head under the blankets. Often, he is hotter at his extremities and less hot at the trunk area, so he may cover his trunk and expose his extremities. When I say that feet out of the blankets grade 3 is a strong trait of sulfur, this refers only to healthy individuals acting like that in a cold room in winter. It don't mean in a hot bedroom in winter on in a hot bedroom in summer. Nor do I refer to a person who is cold in general but his feet are burning due to phlebitis. It has to be an idiosyncratic characteristic and not a symptom of physical disease. If we examine things superficially or don't differentiate in homeopathic diagnosis, then we end up doing great mistakes. Let me give you another example. Lachesis may have an aversion for clothing and coverings because she can't stand anything pressing her, especially at the area of throat, chest, and belly. She may also feel choking in a room because she likes fresh air. She may also have intense flashes during menopause. All the above have nothing to do with sulfur's hot 3 state. Sulfur feels choking in a hot room due to high temperature. His body's air-conditioned system is so weak that he can't cope even with ordinary conditions, not to mention extreme ones. Heat disturbs him physically as well as mentally. He feels stupefied, his mind can't work properly at high temperatures. Pulsatilla, argentum nitricum, and at times lachesis also feel choking in a hot room. Pulsatilla adores open air, it improves all her physical symptoms and even her psychology. During winter she may wear heavy clothing or sleep well covered but still wants the windows open to breathe fresh cool air, or else she is choking. Sulfur feels terrible in a hot room, but he is not so much crazy about fresh air like Pulsatilla or argentum nitricum. Belladonna is also a very hot idiosyncrasy. In fact, she has all the elements of inflammation at their highest degree: heat, redness, swelling, congestion and pain. 13. Redness, acrid sweat, offensiveness. Sulfur, apart from being hot in general, has that natural redness of face. This is of course very much increased if there's any inflammation of the skin of his face, but you can also see that whenever he drinks alcohol. Don't forget that sulfur idiosyncrasy corresponds to the element sulfur. Have any of you experienced inflammation of the skin and eye mucus from spraying sulfur dust to vineyards? Extreme redness of the skin and mucus, congestion, and burning sensation, all relieved from cold water or cold bath. Sulfur often has itching all over after bath, especially after a hot bath. His sweat, apart from being copious, is also acrid and irritating to the skin. Thus, he can easily develop friction burnings, especially at the armpits area or between thighs. Don't confuse this with the friction burnings between thighs that fat people develop due to friction of the skin. If he doesn't bathe for more than 2 or 3 days, he may develop itching of the scalp or anus due to acrid sweat or acrid stool. Leucorrhea of a sulfur woman is also acrid and may inflame the area of external genitals. His white underwear may turn into slightly yellow ones, especially at the area of the armpits due to acrid sweat in the summer. His socks and the inside of his shoes become easily dirty and are worn out quite quickly for the same reason. A male sulfur person often develops white salty depositions at the hair of his armpits during summer due to salty sweat and lack of frequent washing. His offensive sweat can often be detected on entering the room, especially if he neglects body sanitation. You can also feel that with arsenicum, serinum and graphite subjects. All bodily secretions of sulfur are copious, offensive, and acrid, i.e. sweat, urine, stool, etc. A strange characteristic of him is that although his sweat is offensive, quite often he doesn't realize it. In addition, any slightly offensive smell of others is easily detectable by him, annoying him greatly. The dirty, ragged, shallow philosopher. If you put all the above characteristics together, then you'll have the picture of the dirty, rugged philosopher as Kent named Sulphur. He will have an aversion to wash himself. He will buy and wear any kind of outfits irrelevant of fashion, even kitsch ones, because fashion isn't something important for him. Let me remind you of Einstein's look, always in need of a haircut, never combed and with a plethoric unkempt mustache. His biographers say that at times he bought a dozen similar costumes so as not to bother choose what to wear every day. He just opened his closet and wore anything that was just facing him. An army officer affected by sulfur idiosyncrasy is forced to be neat and clean. Nevertheless, a small detail will always reveal his primary tendency: a kitsch tie, a shirt that doesn't match his pants, socks of different color, greasy unwashed hair, etc. His hair is greasy and his skin oily. He has to wash his hair almost every day in order not to have that greasy look. So let's build up that typical sulfuric picture. On entering the office, an offensive odor permeates the room, hot and red face, sweating, greasy hair and face, light outfits, uncombed, unshaven, out of fashion, slovenly. Usually fat, protruding belly, dirty and ragged. Well, that's a typical picture of psychotic sulfur. But you have to be very careful because cultural factors and good manners may change this picture a lot. You still have the same genotype, the same primary behavior, but the phenotype, i.e. the secondary behavior, may even be dramatically altered. For example, a sulfur lawyer, doctor, army officer, businessman, or politician can't afford being dirty and ragged. He is aware of his offensive sweat and greasy skin and hair, so if he wants to be socially accepted and successful, he must wash himself every day, like it or not. Yet, most of the times it's going to be a quick sloppy shower and a quick unsophisticated outfit. You must take in consideration that this typical appearance regards the most theory and not acquainted with miasmatic idiosyncratic materia medica. Such things will seem as troubling inconsistencies to your mind. But, in reality, they aren't but versions of the same idiosyncrasy. 14. Slovenly. You may also come up with a sulfur army officer who seems to be or is very tidy, and you may confuse him for a nux vomica subject. But in such a case, the motive plays the most important role and can clarify things. Nux vomica is tidy per se, is tidy physically because she is tidy. Mentally, she is the typical tidy person as a whole. Sulfur may have become tidy forced by his job or for practical reasons, in order to do the job, in order to cope with plenty of work. Under normal conditions, sulfur is very slovenly. He can turn a tidy room, office, or kitchen into a mess in a couple of minutes. Strangely enough, when it's his chaotic room we are talking about, then he can find things quite easily. You see, it's his own chaos and there seems to be an order of his own in it. Laughing, if his mother, his wife, or the maid turns this room from chaotic to a tidy one, then he will be unable to find anything. She has spoiled his chaotic tidiness. Nevertheless, at times, he has that rare fits of tidiness during which he will try to put all things in order, but it's usually a short fit, a temporary one, and in a couple of minutes or hours, things are back to normal. I have a friend who is a typical slovenly sulfur person. If you are around when he is cooking, you'll never forget sulfur. He doesn't have any rubbish bin. Instead, he hangs a plastic bag by the knob of the kitchen cupboard and puts there all garbage. Dirty fluids run down from the bottom of the bag or splash the external surface of the cupboard almost 1 meter around the bag. He uses countless plates and kitchen tools all at the same time. He puts the spoon with which he tasted the food on the dirty kitchen bench, making it dirtier. A towel is at the same time used to clean the oils from the kitchen bench and at the same time for the drying of his washed clean hands. Finally, anything that falls on the floor stays there for hours or days. There's water, oil, and dirt all over the place. He once told me that when student he lived with a friend of his in a flat in Italy. The kitchen sink had a leak and dirty fluids were running down to the floor of the cupboard and then to the floor of the kitchen. Every day, this creek of filth was approaching the carpet of the living room, and instead of cleaning up and fixing the sink, they rolled the carpet more and more in order not to get dirty. Another sulfuric friend of mine, when we were living at a student's residence hall, used to take off his underwear every night before sleep, turned them inside out, and next morning reversed it and wore it again as if clean. This procedure went on for days and days. Many of the dirty, rugged, Homeless people aren't dirty and rugged due to conditions only but also due to their sulfuric idiosyncrasy. It's a matter of attitude and philosophy. Many dirty, rugged monks are so because of their sulfuric idiosyncrasy and not because they depreciate the body, and because they act against the needs of the flesh. The majority of bohemian poets, naive painters and unconventional artists are sulfur subjects. Sulfur kids and even grown-ups easily get dirty when eating anything. Oil spills on their clothes, crumbs of food all around the table and on the floor all around them. They don't do it on purpose, they just can't help it. Even if they try to avoid it, still end up getting dirty. Some of them, the low-class ones, may even find it very handy to mop their dirty hands, lips, or running nose on their sleeves. 15. Boredom or overactivity. When it comes to pace of activity, you will often come up with two opposite versions. The most common version is boredom and laziness. He won't even raise his hand to grab something. He is so absorbed in TV/computer games/internet that he won't take off his jacket even if he is hot. He won't drink water even if he is thirsty, won't eat even if he is hungry, won't go to the toilet even if he is ready for it. He will say, "Mum, bring me some water." Often, when left without activity, sulfur sinks into boredom and even an almost stupefaction state. He is usually a bright boy, a clever boy, and most of the times he is a good student. Not because he reads a lot but because he can easily understand the essence and the general picture of things. Yet, his books and exercise books are in a mess, torn, folded, dirty, full of drawings, etc. He may put into his school bag the ham and tomato sandwich together with his books, all becoming pink from the tomato juice. Nevertheless, although easily bored, whenever he deals with the few specific things that he is fond of, he is so active and absorbed and even productive. He may watch TV or surf the web for hours and hours. He may play computer games non-stop, again and again. He may grab his bicycle or motorbike and dismantle it to little pieces. Then, full of grease from head to toe, he will assemble it, but still some screws will be left apart as if not needed. If he likes gardening, then he may dig and plant for hours and hours, forgetting wife, kids, and friends, even forgetting to eat or drink. If he likes fishing, he will be sunburned sitting for hours even if doesn't catch any fish. He so much lives in the world of his own, he likes to think and to philosophize with himself. He hates dealing with everyday little matters. They seem so worthless and so boring to him. Tidiness and program is definitely not his field. Give him philosophy, politics, discussions, cultural discussions, mysteries, etc., and he won't be bored at all. He will become enthusiastic and alive. But then you may see a sulfur subject being overactive in general, never stopping for a minute, always doing something, always occupying himself. He may be a businessman working all day long. He may come home from work and won't sit still for a minute, will do gardening, cooking, handy jobs, etc. Cyric sulfur is usually lazy and easily bored, while psychotic sulfur will often be overactive. 16. Stooped and slender or greedy fat. Psychotic sulfur is usually greedy and fat, or at least with a round, protruding belly. Cyric sulfur, on the other hand, is usually slender and stooped. Think of a fanatic believer monk, eating only enough to survive. Always praying and reserved and pale, slender and stooped, bones clearly protruding from his body that has almost non-existing muscles. This is Cyric sulfur. On the other hand, think of a red-faced, chubby monk. Greasy, greedy, fan of wine and joking and fun. This is Psychotic Sulfur. Cyric Sulfur eats in order to live, Psychotic Sulfur lives for the sake of eating. He is so pleased from eating, his best orgasms come from the tongue and stomach. He wants strong tastes, fatty rich food and spicy food, plenty of food. He won't stop eating unless food is up to his throat, and his belly is distended. He so much enjoys fat and fatty rich food. He not only enjoys roasted or fried meat or barbecue, he even likes boiled fatty food, for example the boiled skin of chicken. Nothing tastes good if it doesn't have enough juicy fat in it is his motto. He will definitely choose leg or wings instead of chicken breast. He will prefer anything that has fat, skin, tendons, cartilages and bones, and will lick all bones, leaving nothing for the dog except pure hard bone. So he craves fat grade 3. But, please, be careful. If you have a sulfur patient that is on strict diet due to a severe heart disease, you may ask him about desire for fatty food, and may say no. That doesn't mean that he doesn't like it, it means that he doesn't eat it because he was forbidden to. Whenever we ask about any taste or food, we should always make it clear for our patient that we ask about his desire and not about anything else. Sulfur usually sleeps on his back and often with his hands stretched near his ears or behind his head and legs spread apart. It's not an accidental position, most of the times it has to do with his aversion towards heat. You see, this is the most cooling position, helping his sweat vaporize and cool him and having no part of his body touching another. If a hot part touches another hot part, then heat and sweat are multiplied. Sometimes psychotic sulfur subjects like to sleep on the abdomen just like psychotic Boericke. He often enjoys cold water from the fridge even in winter, and this is due to his sensitivity towards heat. The minute he drinks a glass of water, especially if it's ice cold, he gets it out of his system in sweat. The same happens instantly if he drinks something hot or eats hot food. In the summertime he is desperate, he drinks cold water to cool his organism, and then immediately he is soaking from sweat. If he is somewhere hot and with no wind and drink cold water, then he may be refreshed for minutes or seconds, and then again he is hot, again drinking cold water, until his stomach is full of water, complaining of distension. Phosphor, on the other hand, enjoys drinking ice cold water from the fridge even in winter because that's the only way he can quench his thirst. He just can't drink water with normal temperature. It's as if someone is drinking beer that wasn't in the fridge. A boy Phosphor steals ice cubes from the fridge to let it melt in his mouth like water ice, and his mother is after him, threatening him and shouting at him, "Stop it! You'll get sick." If Phosphor lives at a cold place, then during winter he may not drink water from the fridge. But even then he will leave the tab open until ice cold water comes in from the pipes out of the house. Only then he will enjoy it and quench his thirst. 17. Cyric Buddha or Psychotic Gale. There are also two versions of sulfur regarding his irritability. He may be a Cyric Buddha or a Psychotic Gale. Cyric Sulfur will say that he is calm, and indeed he is. If his wife is a plethoric, irritable lachesis, then she will often tell you, "Holy Jesus, doctor, I try to make him angry and I get nothing. This man is a stupefied cow. He never gets angry. I say to him, be a man for a change. Let the beast get out of you and get angry at least once." Well, nothing happens. The other day our naughty boy sculptured his name on our precious dining room table. I told my husband, "Go and yell to him and punish him." He said yes, yes, and by the time he Managed to get off the chair. Our boy was off to Australia. Don't think that Sulphur is really a Buddha. He seems calm and most times he really is, but only because of boredom. Or only because he considers all everyday little matters as not important, while most wives deal a lot on everyday little matters. Whenever his wife puts forward any subject demanding solution, Sulphur may say, "You handle it, my dear. I am so tired from work." It's like the joke where any time a man wants to get laid, his wife tells him, "Sorry dear, I've got a headache." Laughing. Cyric Sulphur, as mentioned, lives in the world of his own, absent-minded and absorbed in philosophical matters. He usually takes things as they come. All those things that a domineering, overprotective lachesis housewife considers important matters, simply don't count for him. Yet, Cyric Sulphur may say at times that he does get angry. Nevertheless, what he really means is that he restrains his irritability lots of times, and then there comes a rare time when he bursts intensely. But that is a rare incident, not characteristic of the person. You may also find a Cyric Sulphur that easily gets angry, but like a coward, like a podium, keeps his anger for himself, never expressing it for fear of consequences. On the contrary, Psychotic Sulfur resembles Materia as to his irritability. He may not get easily angry, but when he does, then he expresses himself intensely and furiously, but then after some minutes he is totally off, the anger is over and things get back to normal. There's also another version. He becomes easily angry and express it easily like a phosphor, but then he overcomes it very easily. Apart from being slovenly, Sulphur is quite often very clumsy. He walks and stumbles all the time. Any chair or furniture found in front of him may be pushed or turned over. He is so careless that he breaks vases, glasses, plates, etc. He may be a moving disaster. While eating, his clothes become dirty. His handiwork is anything but perfect. If a painter or a sculptor, he will prefer modern art so as not to follow any strict forms that demand precision and accuracy. 18. Introvert, living in the world of his own. Both, Psychotic and Cyric Sulphur, are intensely introvert, especially the latter one. They are introvert grade 3 or at least grade 2. Natrum. Muriaticum is introvert because she doesn't want others to know anything about her personal problems, about her deep felt matters. She wants to sustain a dignified image towards others and society. It's a Cyric egoism. Psychotic Sulphur, on the other hand, is introvert because he thinks that there is no point in talking about his personal matters, since he considers them most of the times as not important. Furthermore, he is very optimistic. He will say, "Let it be. We have to accept all things and take things as they come, what may." Even if he has a personal problem that he considers important, nevertheless, he thinks that there's no point in discussing it, since only he can give solutions to his problems and not others. Cyric Sulphur is introvert because he is pessimistic. He believes that all is vanity. He keeps philosophizing, saying to himself that nothing is really important in the process of a vain lifetime. Cerinum is a really pessimistic idiosyncrasy, deeply Cyric and deeply pessimistic. He is pessimism personified. He sees no light in anything. All are doomed, everything is black. His job is a failure, his personal life is hopeless, even his beloved ones don't give him any joy at all. He knows that he loves them, but that is something strictly intellectual. His emotions are flat, zero, non-existing. His emotions are not in any motion. They are still, flat. Don't confuse this characteristic of Cerinum with aurum. Aurum Metallicum is deeply hurt. Her emotions are in turmoil. She isn't flat. She accuses herself of everything and feels guilty. She feels that she did all things wrong, and being in despair she wants to commit suicide, and often she really does. Yet she isn't flat as to her emotions, while Cerinum's emotions are flat. So, Cyric Sulfur seems introvert and is introvert indeed. Psychotic Sulfur seems to be extrovert because he is so expressive and talking and joking all the time and loves company and fuss, but when it comes to his personal problems he simply doesn't open his mouth. He may even tell you, even if I speak about it, so what, doctor? Will anything change? So why talk about it? If his wife is an extrovert, plethoric idiosyncrasy, for example pulsatilla, she may tell you, oh doctor, he is so introvert, he doesn't speak at all about himself. We are a loving couple, we have kids, we are a loving family, nevertheless, he never wants to talk about us, about our family, he never expresses his feelings, not a word comes out of his mouth as to his deep felt matters. When I push him to talk, he always says, there's nothing to talk about. Even if I talk, will anything change? I am tired, let's change subject. If his wife is a lachesis woman interfering in all things and wanting to control everything, she will say to you, oh doctor, you can't get anything out of him. He is a fish, a speechless cow. What kind of a creature is this? If Sulfur is not educated, then he may not want to talk about everyday matters because he is afraid of becoming embarrassed. And so he becomes reserved and unsocial. 19. Shallow philosopher. Cyric Sulfur has a strange kind of pessimism. It's not an emotional pessimism, it's rather an intellectual and shallow philosophical pessimism. He may say, oh come on, everybody is sold for money. Politicians, doctors, everybody, we are alive. So what? What's life? Other than a constant vain fight? We are born, work like animals, and in the end we are eaten by worms, and that's it. End of story. If this was an emotional pessimism and the person who said that really felt it as an emotion, he could have committed suicide like an aurum metallicum, but Sulfur isn't that way. He is just philosophizing without much emotional participation. If he is a psychotic sulfur person, then his secondary behavior is usually optimistic. Nevertheless, be his secondary behavior pessimistic or optimistic, the important thing is that they both have the same primary behavior. Both Ceric and psychotic sulfur have one common thing, their shallow philosophical disposition. This disposition originates from a natural curiosity about how all things work, about the mechanism involved. Thus, he is interested in how a toaster works up to how universe and God works. He will often ask you, what's homeopathy, doctor? How does it work? If he is a boy receiving a bicycle as a present, he may ask himself the same thing, how does this thing work? Then he will take the screwdriver and dismantle it to satisfy his curiosity. So, every time something happens to him, either regarding his family, his affair, his job, or society, he is always philosophizing about how things work. 20. Crude practical joker. Sulfur, especially psychotic sulfur, is a teaser, a practical joker, a humorist. Cyric sulfur will be a normal teaser, a sarcastic one, but still within boundaries and even rather shy. Psychotic sulfur is a crude practical joker, most times a good one but at times not. Anacardium will do the mean, ironic, spiteful practical joke or humor that will embarrass his victim or humiliate it, and he will enjoy it, proving to himself and others that he is the smartest of all. He will be the boy who stepped deliberately on the cat's tail only to listen to her scream and laugh at her. He will also be the boy who tripped up his grandpa and burst into laughter as the latter fell down, breaking his leg. His mother will say, "Oh my God, the devil got into him." But this is the villain version of anacardium, the syphilitic version, the one that has almost no contact with his moral conscience. This version is a very extreme one. He will do something bad without remorse and guilt, only to confirm to him that he is the one, that he is the smartest. The Cyric version of anacardium is pretty much tortured because he is squeezed between two wills, the villain one, external will, and the good one, internal will/conscience. That's the reason why he feels as if having inside him an evil demon and an angel fighting all the time about who is going to prevail. Psychotic Sulfur may do quite crude practical jokes, but then he hasn't got any mean intention. He may become a bit vulgar or insensitive due to his crude disposition for fun. He may also sincerely apologize if he has hurt someone. He will say, "Sorry pal, I didn't know that it would hurt you so much, but still you have to admit that it was funny, wasn't it?" A psychotic sulfur kid may insert his finger in his nose, take out that green thick staff and place it on the blouse of the boy sitting on the desk in front of him just for fun. Or a grown-up may come to your marriage and interrupt the ceremony only to ask his groom friend loudly in front of the audience, "Are you sure you don't want to reconsider before saying I do?" He may also say crude dirty jokes to people that he first meets at social gatherings, even if they are elderly or very conservative. I have a psychotic sulfur patient that every time he comes in my office he will start with a crude, long, dirty joke, although he was late at his appointment and people are impatiently waiting at the hall. Yet, he is lovable. Phosphor is also very humorous and the heart and soul of any party or gathering. His humor is more refined and polite than Sulphur's, and his intention is very positive and sincere. He wants to make others feel better and really have fun. Lycopodium is not a successful humorist most of the times. His jokes are very sophisticated and intellectual, and the way he says them is so Ceric and shy that no laugh is produced. He will even try to explain his jokes immediately after saying them. It reminds me of the sophisticated, intellectual jokes of Woody Allen. Madorinum's jokes and practical jokes resemble the ones of Psychotic Sulfur, but not as successful as the latter's. 21. Neglectful as to his health and indifferent as to little everyday matters. Sulfur, especially the psychotic version, usually isn't afraid about his health, just like Madorinum. The latter feels so strong physically and so tough psychologically, so why afraid of something bad? Sulfur, on the other hand, isn't afraid about his health because he has done a lot of philosophizing about life and death. Psychotic Sulfur and Madorinum are also neglectful as to their health. They must be forced by others or by their problems in order to consult a doctor. They are both very unwilling. When it comes to tests, strict diets, complex medications, etc. On the contrary, a Ceric sulfur subject, when adopting a certain philosophy and ideology, may deal with his health, employ healthy nutrition, meditation techniques, alternative treatments, herbs, acupuncture and such stuff. I have a patient around 45 years old. He imports Indian clothing, accessories and such things. He lives a bohemian life. When it's winter in Greece, he goes to Thailand because it's summer over there. He lives in a shack, enjoys the sea and sun, practices yoga and meditation, is dirty and slovenly, eats healthy and philosophizes. Then when summer starts in Greece, he comes back going from island to island selling Indian clothes and accessories, again living in an unconventional way. Sulfur, especially psychotic sulfur, isn't only neglectful as to his health. He is also neglectful as to his clothing, his diet, his car, his house, and his belongings. You may see a carpenter who is good at his job to live in a house where wooden furniture are a wreck. His wife keeps nagging, "For God's sake, you are a carpenter and the door of our house is ready to fall apart. What will people say about it?" "Okay, okay, I will do it tomorrow," he replies. Yet, his wife knows that tomorrow will never come. You may, of course, come up with a sulfur subject that is very scared when he is told that he has a severe disease. But, most of the times after a while he philosophizes and overcomes fear, he will say, "What can a man do, doctor? We are all going to die after all. What now, what? Tomorrow." 22. The superficial bibliomaniac of the strange and mystery books. Quite often he likes reading books a lot. Yet, there are distinct differences between sulfur and the other great bibliomaniac, i.e. Lycopodium. Lycopodium likes to read cultured and sophisticated books, essays, dissertations, theses, and scientific reviews. He will be the systematic and thorough reader. He wants to know many new things, not so out of curiosity but because he wants to build his intellectual image towards others. He is dying to lecture to others about what he knows, displaying strong arguments, solid proofs, bibliography, results from scientific research, references, footnotes, quotations, etc. He is fan of rational thinking, of logic and scientific methodology. It doesn't matter what his subject is or if he really believes in it. He may be a fan of ancient Greek civilization, a Christian, a Buddhist, or an atheist. What really matters is that he is a systematic and thorough reader and lecturer, fond of detailed notes, diagrams, charts, graphics, displays, statistics, etc. Sulfur, on the other hand, has no respect for methodology or books. He will spill food on any book while reading it, may damage its cover, read first the end and then the beginning and some scattered paragraphs. Then he is going to lecture you on what he has read without strong arguments or references, but still with absoluteness, as if he knows all things, whether against or for the author. If he is a student, he may only read the most possible themes that can be included at a test, and usually he does well because he is smart. He will never do systematic reading. He is too lazy for such a thing. Still, he is very good at producing original, unconventional, and liberal ideas. It may, of course, be impossible for him or others to apply them in everyday life, but still, they are original. Many poor inventors that invent peculiar machines of worthless practical use are in fact sulfur individuals. He is so fond of mysteries. He will read about the Bermuda Triangle, Egyptian pyramids, aliens, black holes of the universe, scientific discoveries, detective novels, science fiction, Holly books, metaphysical books, etc. He also enjoys documentaries about strange animals and mysteries of nature, adventures, comedies, satire, and several light stuff. Lycopodium, on the other hand, will prefer that cultured, sophisticated European movies with slow filming done by that cult director or that cult underground non-commercial actor. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and share this video. Have a nice day.